June 11th, 2026, 2:07, local time. The northern Arabian Sea, approximately 140 nautical miles southeast of the port of Bandar Abbas. The sea temperature is 31 degrees Celsius. The air above it is thick with humidity and the faint smell of petrochemicals drifting south from the Iranian coast. There is no moon. A U.S. Navy forward logistics support vessel. An expeditionary sea base ship. 784 feet of converted semi-submersible hull, carrying fuel, ammunition, aviation spares, and a reinforced security detachment. Is holding a stationary anchor position at a pre-coordinated support point, conducting a nighttime replenishment cycle for 2 Arleigh Burke-class destroyers moored alongside on port and starboard transfer rigs. The operation has been underway for 4 hours. It is, in every administrative sense, going exactly as planned. 42 nautical miles to the north, beyond the radar horizon. 6 IRGC Navy. Fast patrol boats are holding position with their engines idling. Fuel-saving mode. Minimal electronic emissions. No AIS transponders active. They have been there since 2340, and at an altitude of 4,200 meters. Drifting on a pre-programmed waypoint hold pattern 28 kilometers north-northeast of the logistics ship. A single Shahed 149 Gaza reconnaissance drone. A long endurance platform capable of 35 hours on station. Is transmitting a continuous compressed video feed of the replenishment operation to a ground station at Jask Naval Base via encrypted satellite relay. The IRGC has been watching this operation since it began. Welcome. I'm your host at Navy Legends, and tonight we are breaking down a scenario that cuts closer to current operational reality than almost anything we have covered on this channel. Not a carrier strike. Not a ballistic missile intercept in open ocean. Tonight, we are examining the attack that asymmetric warfare doctrine was always designed to deliver. A massed, multi-domain strike against a vulnerable logistics node, executed with precision timing, electronic deception, and a weapon mix specifically engineered to saturate the defensive systems of a ship that was never designed to fight alone. This is a fictional simulation. Every system named here is real. Every tactic described has a documented origin in IRGC operational doctrine. Let's go back to June 11th. The strategic context is compressed but important. 6 weeks earlier, in late April, U.S. forces had conducted a series of targeted strikes against IRGC-linked weapon storage facilities in eastern Syria, in response to a drone attack that killed 2 American contractors at Al Tanf garrison. Iran had condemned the strikes as an act of war. The Supreme Leader had issued a formal statement promising a calculated and devastating response at a time and place of our choosing. U.S. Central Command had raised force protection to FPCON Charlie across all regional assets. The elevated posture had been in place for 41 days. 41 days is a long time to hold maximum alert. Threat fatigue is real. It is documented in psychology research, in military history, and in the incident reports of every major surprise attack in the modern era. By June 11th, some of the edge had come off the heightened posture. Procedures were still being followed, but they were being followed the way procedures are followed after 41 days of nothing happening. The Shahed 149 drone overhead had been detected by the logistics ship's SPS-73 surface search radar at 2352. It was large enough to paint a return at that altitude. It was logged as a probable Iranian surveillance drone, consistent with previous pattern-of-life observations in the area. No action was taken beyond logging the contact and notifying the duty intelligence officer, who acknowledged and returned to other tasks. This was not negligence. It was the accumulated logic of 41 days of surveillance drones that had never attacked. At 2:03:40, 3 minutes and 20 seconds before our timestamp, the Shahed 149's ground station at Jask transmitted a 4-character authentication code to the attack coordination cell at a hardened IRGC Navy facility south of Bandar Abbas. The code was a go signal. At 2:04, 20 seconds later, the attack coordination cell transmitted launch authorization simultaneously to 4 separate systems. The first system was a battery of Arash-2 loitering munitions, kamikaze drones, positioned on 6 modified fishing vessels, 38 nautical miles to the northwest. Each vessel carried a rack of 8 Arash-2 units, 48 loitering munitions in total. The Arash-2 is a delta-winged kamikaze drone with a 30-kilogram shaped charge warhead, a cruise speed of 185 kilometers per hour, and a radar cross-section of approximately 0.005 square meters. At sea level, against a ship-based radar system optimized for surface search rather than low-altitude air defense, the Arash-2 is extremely difficult to detect at ranges beyond 12 nautical miles. The second system was a battery of Noor anti-ship cruise missiles, the Iranian domestically produced variant of the Chinese C-802, positioned at a mobile launch site on the Shesham Island coastline, 127 kilometers to the northwest. 4 Noor missiles, each carrying a 165-kilogram semi-armor-piercing warhead, each flying a sea-skimming profile at Mach 0.8. The third system was the 6 IRGC fast patrol boats already holding position 42 nautical miles north. Their mission was not to directly attack the logistics ship. Their mission was to create radar clutter, draw fire, and close to within torpedo range of one of the moored destroyers if the opportunity presented itself in the confusion of the primary strike. The fourth system was a pair of Zolfaghar short-range ballistic missiles. Solid fuel, road mobile, 700-kilometer range, CEP of approximately 10 meters. Positioned at a launch site in Kerman province, pre-targeted on the anchor position of the logistics ship based on the Shahed 149 surveillance feed. The Zolfaghar would be the final layer. The weapon that arrived after the defense was already exhausted. The attack geometry was not elegant. It was not intended to be elegant. It was intended to be overwhelming. 48 loitering munitions, plus 4 cruise missiles, plus 6 fast attack craft, plus 2 ballistic missiles, all arriving in a compressed 18-minute engagement window. Against a logistics ship and 2 destroyers that collectively carried a finite number of defensive weapons and a finite number of human beings capable of processing simultaneous threat tracks. At 2:07, our timestamp, the Arash-2 swarm lifted from the 6 fishing vessels and began its approach on a bearing of 165 degrees, flying at an altitude of between 25 and 40 meters above sea level. Grouped in loose clusters of 8 to 12 with 400-meter lateral spacing between clusters, the logistics ship's SPS-73 radar painted the first contacts at 2:09:22, 11.4 nautical miles out, bearing 344 degrees. Not one contact. A smear of contacts. A radar return consistent with a flock of large seabirds, or a formation of small unmanned aircraft, or radar sea clutter from an anomalous atmospheric ducting effect, common in the Arabian Sea in summer months. The watch supervisor stared at the return for 3.4 seconds before she keyed her radio. Combat bridge. I have a degraded picture northwest, bearing 344, range 11 miles. Assess possible UAV contacts. Request classification. Combat Information Center responded in 8 seconds. Bridge. Combat. Concur possible UAV return. Cannot classify at this range. Initiating query to the screen destroyers. The screen destroyers, moored alongside on transfer rigs, their own radars in standby mode during the replenishment to reduce electromagnetic interference, needed 67 seconds to bring their AN/SPY-1D systems to full operational status. 67 seconds was the designed quick reaction time for that transition. At 2:10:31, the first destroyer's SPY-1D came online and immediately painted a vastly cleaner picture. Not ambiguous seabird returns. 41 discrete small signature airborne contacts at ranges between 8.2 and 10.7 nautical miles, bearing 340 to 352 degrees, altitude 30 meters, closing speed 185 kilometers per hour. Vampire, vampire, vampire. Multiple inbound UAV contacts, bearing 341 through 352, range 8 to 11 miles. Count 40 plus. This is a swarm attack. The word swarm went out on the formation net at 2:10:33. The replenishment operation stopped. Transfer rigs were disconnected. The logistics ship began emergency weighing of anchor. a process that takes a minimum of 8 minutes for a vessel of that tonnage. The two destroyers began emergency departure from the alongside position, a maneuver that required clearing transfer equipment and backing clear before the ships could maneuver freely. Under emergency conditions, from moored alongside to free maneuvering, the fastest achievable time was approximately 6 minutes. 6 minutes. The Arash-2 swarm was 8 minutes away at its current closing speed. The tactical action officer aboard the first destroyer had, in practical terms, 4 defensive options. The Phalanx CYWS, 2 mounts, capable of 4,500 rounds per minute each, was the primary point defense weapon against the low-altitude swarm. The RAM, rolling airframe missile, Block 2 launcher with 21 ready rounds, could engage multiple simultaneous targets, but would be consumed quickly against a 40-plus target swarm. SM-2, surface-to-air missiles could engage the drones, but were badly optimized for the engagement geometry. Designed for higher altitude threats at longer ranges, not for a swarm at 30 meters altitude inside 10 miles. And the ship's 5-inch Mark 45 main gun could be slewed to a direct-fire anti-air roll with a cyclic rate of 20 rounds per minute. None of these systems, individually or combined, could stop 48 simultaneous inbound contacts. At 2:11:05, the SPY-1D painted the Noor cruise missiles. 4 contacts, bearing 320 degrees, range 61 nautical miles, altitude 8 meters, speed Mach 0.81. They had been in the air for 7 minutes already, having launched at 2:04, flying low and slow on their sea-skimming approach profile, masked by the horizon until this range. The tactical picture had just doubled in complexity. The tactical action officer made her weapons assignment in 6 seconds. SM-2, salvo on the Noor missiles. 4 SM-2, Block 3B, 1 per cruise missile contact, fired from VLS cells 6, 8, 12, and 14. RAM Block 2 on the leading edge of the drone swarm. Phalanx in autonomous engagement mode on anything that got inside 2 nautical miles. The 5-inch gun directed at the center mass of the swarm at maximum cyclic rate. At 2:11:14, 4 SM-2s left the VLS. At 2:11:19, the RAM launcher began firing. The second destroyer, still clearing the transfer rigs, not yet fully free maneuvering, was unable to bring its own weapon systems to bear without risk of fratricidal fire on its own deck crew still clearing equipment. It was, for 4 minutes and 12 seconds, effectively a spectator. The RAM missiles performed exactly as designed. The Block 2 variant uses passive infrared and radio frequency homing to engage small, slow, low-altitude targets. Precisely the Arash-2's profile. In the first engagement sequence, between 2:11:19 and 2:12:44, the RAM launcher fired 17 rounds and scored 14 confirmed kills. 14 Arash, 2 loitering munitions detonated or crashed into the sea between 6.1 and 3.8 nautical miles from the formation. 27 remained. The Phalanx mounts, both operational, both in autonomous mode, began engaging at 2:12:51 when the lead drones reached 2.1 nautical miles. The 20mm Gatling systems tracked and engaged with extraordinary mechanical precision, hosing bursts of tungsten penetrators across the clustered approach tracks. In 3 minutes and 14 seconds of continuous engagement, the 2 Phalanx mounts expended 4,200 rounds and killed 19 additional Arash-2 units. 8 Arash-2 drones reached the formation. 6 struck the logistics ship. 2 struck the first destroyer, which had finally cleared the transfer rigs and was beginning to maneuver, but had not yet opened sufficient distance from the larger vessel. The logistics ship took 6 shaped charge warheads across its upper deck structure and hangar bay in a span of 11 seconds. The first 2 struck the helicopter hangar, detonating aviation fuel stored in forward blivets and igniting a fire that would burn for 6 hours. The third struck the bridge structure. The fourth and fifth struck the main deck aft of the crane assembly near the ammunition elevator. The sixth struck the waterline. The lowest trajectory drone in the final cluster, its altitude control degraded by the electromagnetic environment near the Phalanx muzzle blast, flew a depressed approach and hit 2 meters above the waterline on the starboard quarter. The ammunition elevator vicinity detonation was the most serious. It did not detonate stored ordnance. The magazine suppression system activated within 0.4 seconds and prevented sympathetic detonation. But the structural damage to the elevator shaft flooded 3 adjacent compartments and created a 6-degree starboard list that would persist for 11 hours until emergency counterflooding corrected it. The fire in the helicopter hangar killed 7 sailors and wounded 19. One of the 2 MH-60 helicopters in the hangar at the time of the strike was destroyed. The second was badly damaged, but recovered later for parts. The 2 Arash-2 hits on the first destroyer struck the aft superstructure and the number 2 VLS cell array. The VLS strike was the more dangerous. The shaped charge penetrated the cell cover of one loaded cell, triggering an emergency suppression sequence that safed the cell, but rendered 8 adjacent VLS cells inoperable through the blast damage to their launch control wiring. The destroyer lost 1/3 of its forward VLS capacity in that single hit. Meanwhile, the SM-2 engagement of the Noor cruise missiles had proceeded. 3 of 4 missiles achieved intercepts. The 4th SM-2 missed. Its seeker lost track during a sharp evasive maneuver. The Noor's terminal guidance executed at 4.2 nautical miles. A backup SM-2 was launched immediately and achieved intercept at 2.8 nautical miles. All 4 Noor cruise missiles were neutralized. The fast patrol boats, all 6 of them, had closed to 22 nautical miles during the swarm engagement, using the electronic noise of the battle as cover. At 2:14:40, as the drone strike was in its final phase, the second destroyer, now fully free maneuvering and weapons ready, detected all 6 boats on surface search radar and immediately lit them with its fire control system. The patrol boats turned north and withdrew at maximum speed. No torpedoes were fired. The boats vanished back toward Iranian territorial waters. The Zolfaghar ballistic missiles launched at 2:16, 12 minutes after the initial attack authorization, as planned. The pre-targeting data from the Shahed 149 had placed the logistics ship at a specific anchor position, but the ship had been weighing anchor since 2:10:17, 9 minutes earlier, and had moved approximately 340 meters from its logged position. The first Zolfaghar detonated 280 meters off the starboard bow of the logistics ship, close enough to cause concussive damage to the hull plating and knock several sailors off their feet, not close enough to penetrate. The second Zolfaghar, launched on a 14-second delay from the first, updated its terminal guidance from the Shahed 149 feed. But the surveillance drone's ground station link had been severed 90 seconds earlier when an EA-18G, Growler electronic attack aircraft, vectored to the area by an E-2D Hawkeye that had been airborne on a routine patrol 180 miles to the south, executed a targeted jamming run on the Jask Naval Base satellite uplink frequencies. The Shahed 149 lost its data link. Its surveillance feed went dark. The second Zolfaghar's terminal guidance update never arrived. The second Zolfaghar impacted 890 meters northeast of the formation. No damage. The EA-18G had arrived on station at 2:17:22. It had been diverted and given its jamming assignment at 2:11:55, 80 seconds after the swarm was first definitively classified. The crew had executed the intercept in 5 minutes and 27 seconds from assignment to first jamming transmission. 80 seconds of decision-making. 5 minutes of execution. It saved the ship from the ballistic missiles. The engagement ended at 2:22:14, when the last credible inbound track faded from the radar picture and the tactical action officer called all threats neutralized over the formation net. Total duration from first swarm contact to end of engagement, 12 minutes and 52 seconds. 7 sailors killed, 23 wounded, 1 logistics ship with serious fires, structural damage, and a starboard list. 1 destroyer with 8 VLS cells offline and aft superstructure damage. 1 MH-60 helicopter destroyed, and the IRGC had lost 48 loitering munitions, 4 cruise missiles, 2 ballistic missiles, and the Shahed 149 surveillance drone, which the E-2D crew had passed to a second F/A-18F on combat air patrol. which had prosecuted it with an AIM-120AMRAAM at 2/1907. The response came in two phases. The first phase was immediate and unilateral. Under the same ROE directive, 7 Alpha framework that had been applied in the Red Sea. The second destroyer's commanding officer, senior officer afloat following the damage to the first destroyer's command spaces, authorized a Tomahawk strike package against the Noor missile battery on Keshem Island. 4 Tomahawk Block 5 missiles left the VLS at 2:29:44. They arrived at 3:04:11. The launch site was destroyed. Secondary explosions from stored missiles cooked off for 40 minutes. The fishing vessels that had carried the Arash-2 launchers had dispersed. By the time Tomahawk strike authorization could be processed for those targets, the vessels had scattered across 80 square miles of open water, mixed with genuine commercial fishing traffic. No engagement was authorized. The IRGC fast patrol boats had returned to Iranian territorial waters before any strike authorization could be processed. The Zolfaghar launch site in Kerman province was identified by SIGINT within 90 minutes of the attack. A strike package was proposed. It was not authorized. Kerman province is deep inside Iranian territory. A strike there was assessed as crossing an escalation threshold that the National Security Council was not prepared to cross without presidential authorization. The authorization request sat in the queue. The second phase of response was conducted over the following 96 hours through diplomatic channels, financial pressure mechanisms, and 2 carefully orchestrated leaks to selected media outlets of signals intelligence showing direct IRGC command authority over the attack. Leaks designed to make the Iranian denial publicly untenable while stopping short of providing formal casus belli for broader conflict. It worked, in the narrow sense. Iran denied involvement with declining conviction. 3 allied governments issued coordinated condemnations. 2 European banks with Iranian correspondent relationships suspended transactions pending review. The stock price of 3 Iranian-linked shipping companies dropped 14% in 48 hours. The logistics ship was towed to Bahrain for emergency repairs. The timeline for return to service was assessed at 4 to 6 months. This is what Navy legends keeps coming back to. The asymmetric calculation that makes this kind of attack so strategically attractive to a force like the IRGC. The entire attack package: 48 Arash-2 drones, 4 Noor cruise missiles, 2 Zolfaghar ballistic missiles, 6 patrol boats, 1 surveillance drone, the targeting infrastructure, the planning cycle, cost Iran an estimated $14 to $18 million to execute, the damage to US forces, the ship repairs, the lost helicopter, the medical evacuation costs, the VLS reloads, the lost operational availability of 2 major naval platforms, represented a direct cost of several $100 million. The indirect cost in disrupted replenishment cycles, heightened force protection requirements, and rerouted logistics across the region is not publicly calculable, but is assessed in the billions. That asymmetry is the strategy. Iran does not need to sink the ship. Iran needs to demonstrate that using the ship costs more than it is worth. That every replenishment cycle, every logistics movement, every forward deployment in the northern Arabian Sea requires a level of defensive commitment that is exhausting, expensive, and ultimately unsustainable at scale. The 7 sailors who died on June 11th are not statistics in that calculation. They are not assets or liabilities. They are the reason the calculation has to be answered, not with grief, but with engineering. Better swarm defense, better electronic attack integration, better replenishment doctrine that reduces the vulnerability window of the alongside mooring posture, because the IRGC is already planning the next one. The Arash-2 is being replaced by the Arash-3, a faster, lower radar cross-section variant with an improved shaped charge. The Shahed 149 is being upgraded with a backup satellite relay that defeats single-axis jamming. The fishing vessel launch platforms are being replaced with semi-submersible drone carriers that are harder to detect on surface search radar. They are iterating. They are always iterating. And the only answer to iteration is faster iteration on our side. Stay informed. Stay vigilant. I'll see you in the next one.